some of the most incredible things that if you asked me 3 years ago when I was first on your show, would we ever see anything like this, or do you think you'd see anything like this? I'd probably say maybe once in my lifetime I'd be super happy. So blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, people in wheelchairs that from strokes with paralysis walking again. I mean, these are profound upgrades biologically. I think if you teach people the what and the why, then the how gets easier because it becomes practical. And when people understand the what and the why, they assign meaning to what they're doing, and they switch on their prefrontal cortex. That executive function in the brain actually dampens down the circuits that has nothing to do with anything else but that single-minded thought, right? So when you understand the what and the why, and there's nothing left to conjecture, to superstition, to dogma, to spirituality, that science is the contemporary language that we use to demystify the mystical. So when that person stands on the stage and they're telling their story and they're the example of truth, they're speaking truth, right? So they've actually applied those principles that were once philosophical, theoretical, that was just basically knowledge, and the application, the personalization, the demonstration created an experience. Experience is really what changes us because it enriches the circuitry in the brain, but the end product of an experience is an emotion, right? And emotion is what teaches our body chemically to understand what our mind intellectually understood. I look out in the audience and people are leaning in. You know, they're looking at truth. They're looking at an example of truth. That is the 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
That's somebody who broke through a level of consciousness or unconsciousness that says that we can heal by thought alone. So what is the science behind that? So when we started bringing in reputable scientists, people that are well published, that spend their life studying microbiology and cellular function and epigenetics and brainwave function and all these other different elements, thousands of metabolites on a cellular level that could be secreted. We're looking very specifically when we did these studies. So we started studying everything. And we started looking at brains, and we started looking at hearts, and then we started noticing that people would have these very, very, very transcendental moments where there was a significant arousal that took place in their brain. And that arousal, which is typically based in fear, in anger or aggression or in pain, that's a survival response. This arousal was ecstasy. This arousal was bliss. So the amount of energy in those people's brains during that moment of the only way that I could describe it is connection. That moment produced such a level of energy in the brain that it was hundreds of times normal.
And this is being measured. You're doing the brain scans.
We're measuring it in real time.
Right, exactly.
And then when we see these very, very high degrees of energy in the brain, at the same time, we're seeing a high level of order. Now, not just a little order, not a lot of order, like a supernatural amount of order.
When you say order, Joe, do you mean the coherence between the brain and the heart, or what do you mean by order when you say that?
Okay, so if you're late for an appointment, you got to pick your kid up, there's 10 texts you have to answer, and something went wrong at the office. The arousal of the stress hormones causes us to move into that primitive nervous system of survival. And when we're in stress, we're trying to control, we're trying to predict, we're trying to organize our life because that unknown is something can go wrong. It's unpredictable. So we shift our attention to one person, to another meeting, to another place we have to go, another time, another thing we have to do. And every single one of those elements has a neurological network in our brain because you've experienced your wife, you've experienced your coworker, you experienced your pain in your back, your cell phone, whatever. You have a relationship with everything physical or material. And it's mapped neurologically in the brain. In fact, the neocortex is really a record of the past, right? So the arousal of those stress hormones causes us to shift our attention to all of these different elements, and we activate those circuits. And like a lightning storm in the clouds, the brain starts firing very incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. And when the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. At the same exact time, you're sitting in traffic. You can't really run. There's nowhere to run. You can't really fight. There's no one to fight. And, you can't really hide. And so the arousal of this primitive nervous system causes the heart, its rate to increase and a respiratory rate to increase because that was the